This RealAg Radio podcast is brought to you by AIM EC Herbicide from FMC. Power up your spring burn-off and savings with AIM EC Herbicide. Control the toughest weeds, plus get $4 off per acre with the ACE Resistant Weeds program. Visit ag.fmc.com for more.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147 Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this midweek edition of the show. It is Wednesday, everybody, and we are jam-packed, loaded lineup today on the program. Thank you so much for joining us here today. Oh, a little tired today, a little short on sleep. You know, I've been reading a bunch of books relative to trying to improve on your sleep. I have the best of intentions of trying to get more sleep and better sleep. Been trying a bunch of stuff. I read this listened to this really good book called Why We Sleep by Dr. Matthew Walker. Fantastic book. Great listen on Audible. But man, I fail. I just suck. I try. I had a great time yesterday in Pasco, Washington, and Kennewick, Washington, in the Tri-City area. Fantastic crowd at the Cropping Systems Conference. Great audience. It's like 400 farmers and agronomists and extension people that were in attendance. We had a fabulous time talking a lot about Canada-U.S. issues, farmer profitability concerns on both sides of the border, policy stuff. I had a fantastic time, got home super late, but really enjoyed my time yesterday in the PNW. The PNW is beautiful. And I don't know if you need to go in January, but if you are ever looking for a summer holiday and you have not been to Washington and Oregon, highly encourage you to do so. It is really spectacular, and a lot of people. My Uber driver to the airport was a realtor, and he was saying like huge growth, people moving there like crazy right now, from all over. I said from where? I was looking for kind of a state read, like is it Californians or what is it? He just said all over the world. Major boom happening in the Tri-City area. Okay, today on the program, we got some fun. We got Tyler Schau from agmarket.net out of North Dakota. We're going to talk about what he's expecting out of this market in 2025. We've also got Terry Drabiuk with Genesis Fertilizers and a product spotlight. John Barlow, Shadow Minister for Agriculture and Agri-Food, will be with us to talk about the meeting that he was at in Iowa last week. And then we'll also finish up today with Krista Thomas from Canada Grains Council to talk about this USMCA CUSMA dispute resolution panel on biotech corn between the U.S. and Mexico. Well, how does that impact Canada? So we'll get to that today. Now, if you have any feedback, we'd love to hear from you. Send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. And you can also call that RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Make sure if you're listening on Rural Radio, make sure you download the podcast version, extended interviews, as well bonus segments. Yes, bonus segments. You get an extended version of the show exclusive to our podcast listeners. Let's take a break. When we come back, we got Tyler Schau. We're talking markets with agmarket.net right after this.
Farmers feed the world with an ever-growing population and less acreage to do it. Since 1946, Nature's Alpine Solutions has been providing sustainable fertility solutions for all crops. We don't just sell fertilizer, we live and work in agriculture every single day. We're the pioneers of liquid fertility, selling the Nature's brand in the U.S. and the Alpine brand in Canada. To learn more, call us at 877-265-BIO-K today.
The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is your one-stop shop for everything a canola grower needs. Check out our free video series on YouTube for all the latest in canola agronomy, research, marketing, and more. Don't have time to watch? Download the podcast version of the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com or anywhere you download your podcasts. Stay on top of all things canola with the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com brought to you by BASF and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
Through a growing storm of kochia, cleavers, chickweed, and more, there's a clear path. Introducing Oxbow, a versatile cereal broadleaf herbicide that gets the job done. Powered by Duplisan technology, Oxbow is your workhorse on resistant kochia and other tough weeds. With flexibility in timing, rates, and recropping options, your path is clear. Find your way on the path of least resistance at newfarm.ca/Oxbow.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Hey, coming up here at the end of January, 28th and 29th in Edmonton, it's the Crossroads Conference. The conference is designed to empower attendees with cutting-edge insights, technological advancements, and sustainable practices crucial for modern farming. Future-proof your farm and get tickets by going to crossroadscropconference.ca. Let's talk markets here on this midweek edition of RealAg Radio. Joining us right now is Tyler Schau from agmarket.net, based in North Dakota. Tyler, how are we doing?
Doing good. How have you been, Shaun?
Pretty good. Yeah, you have a good Christmas holiday season?
Yeah, it was good. We got to go back to Iowa. That's kind of my home country, so I got to visit family and eased our way back to North Dakota last week and got back in the swing of stuff.
Yeah, as you're talking to family members involved in agriculture, what's kind of the mood right now? What are you picking up?
It's I don't want to say disheartening. There's some worry out there. Budgets are getting tight. I had a nice long talk yesterday with a former professor that I worked with that's now working for the North Dakota soy. And, we kind of talked about this same thing, and he's kind of hearing the same thing I do for my customers. There's a group of producers out there that are sitting very well financially. They own a lot of land. They didn't go and try to grow a bunch over the last few years. And their attitude is, hey, this is farming, and this is the job we decided to do. There's some others that got a little more concern, and I understand that things took kind of a quick turn, just a couple of years ago, and a lot of people maybe weren't as prepared for that as they needed to be.
Yeah, 2025 kind of feels, like yesterday I was in the PNW. Next week I'm in Saskatoon. I think it's, you were in Iowa over the holidays. You're in North Dakota. I think it's the same vibe everywhere. And some of the pillars and the structure, the context exists for that wide geo, no matter what crop you're growing in the major broadacre row crops. Like it's the balance sheet, it's cash flow. It's kind of weathering a period here. It's not where you're like, adding to the trust fund, but you're trying to get to the other side of it. And depending on what your strategy has been the past 3 years, it's really dictating how you feel today about the next one or two.
Yeah, and I don't want to get too nerdy here, but bear in mind I taught economics and finance for several years. And one of the things I used to tell my students was, when it came to all the financial benchmarks, when it came down to it, the most important one was working capital, working capital, working capital. And the problem with working capital is there's not a real great measurement tool for it, right? Because it's just it's amount of liquid assets or cash that you got available to burn through when times get tough, right? It's to avoid having to sell off long-term and intermediate assets, go deeper into debt. There are measures that we can use to define what a good amount of working capital is, but otherwise it's just a number, and it's really hard to define for each different operation what that measurement should be or what that number should be. But you come into times like these, and that's where that working capital is a really powerful tool in the producer's toolkit if they've got access to it.
Yeah, being short net working capital, being short on cash, it forces you into decisions you don't want to make sometimes.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Okay, so relative to the markets, as you look ahead to 2025 here in this crop, but not even in the ground yet.
Yeah.
What are some of the indicators, or like what are some of the things that you're watching that we need to be really paying attention to, or they're the threads that are critical? Like, just let's talk about the year ahead here.
One of the things that I think we've really got to pay attention to is going to be and bear in mind, I'm in the U.S. here, but that dollar, the currency values.
Dude, we're paying attention to that too. Don't worry.
Well, yeah, depending on how things go, you might you might need to pay closer attention to that as you move forward. All joking aside, the dollar values, that's one of the things I've been saying about wheat for a long time, because over the last few years we've seen world-ending stocks of wheat drop, and for 2 decades all that thing did was just grow. Every time we got a balance sheet from the USDA, world-ending stocks on wheat just continued to grow and grow. And now we're in a 3 or 4 year span where we've seen that world-ending stocks on wheat drop. The problem we've got is that the demand isn't flowing into the United States anyhow, and it really isn't flowing into Canada as much as maybe we need to see it in order to really pop that those 3 major wheat classes higher here for us. So we really need to see some type of a sharp demand for North American wheat. In my opinion, we need to see exports pick up to where all of a sudden that might get the attention. That might start pushing some wheat higher for us. Or prices higher, but until we see that and a meaningful impact, I just think we're going to be in the doldrums there. It's going to be tough to see some meaningful movement on wheat prices, and when you're staring at a 109 on the dollar index, it's really tough for foreign countries to come in and buy ours when they can go elsewhere.
And if you look at the near term March contract on spring wheat, in the last year we were briefly at $8 on the future. Mm-hmm. We're looking around 588 now. So, and very much a sideways trade, looking for a direction. Farmers are hoping up.
Yeah, farmers are hoping up. Like I said, there's a chance of it. We're seeing some other areas of the world having some struggles. Nothing major, nothing where I would say, to go out and buy wheat or to hold on, and prices are going, much higher. There are some issues and hot spots popping up, and again, I'll go back to, I've probably said this on your program before. One of the other problems you got with wheat is, there's a crop of wheat being harvested almost 12 months out of the year now in the world environment that we're in. So, having large stocks and carryovers isn't quite as important as it was maybe 10 to 15 years ago. I'm not saying it's not important. I'm not downplaying that world-ending stocks number. It's just we can replenish it relatively quickly, really all around the globe now.
Yeah. Do you think one of the issues as well is what happens on the trade front, more from a friction standpoint? I don't want to call it like a trade war, but trade conflict and how that potentially impacts U.S. exports?
That's one of those balls that are up in the air that, depending on how you want to look at stuff, you come up with a new idea of what's going to happen almost daily. Yeah. We live in a soundbite world now, right? Where a president or a soon-to-be president says one thing, and that soundbite gets blasted out all over Twitter and news briefs and press conferences all over the world. And some of it could be saber rattling and rhetoric, just to try to get what we want done. But some of it's going to be, it's likely we're going to see some type of a spat. I guess in 2 weeks we're going to have a lot better idea of what to look forward to in 2025 than we do right now. I've got a feeling there's going to be some friction, as you described. I think that's a good word.
Yeah, I don't want to say war. Friction and conflict, I think, is yesterday in Pasco, Washington, I showed a slide, and it's from the ag barometer out of Purdue and CME, and asking farmers in November, how likely do you think U.S. agriculture is at risk of a trade war that results in a significant decrease in U.S. agricultural exports? 32% neutral, 27% saying likely, and 15% saying very likely. And so let's just say those farmers are correct that is likely to happen. I think the high dollar is also a factor here. That's also, I think, sometimes a little bit under. People don't realize how expensive U.S. commodities are right now coming out of the U.S. because of that strong dollar. this kind of situation does sort of change some of the trade flows again. It doesn't mean the U.S. doesn't export. It just changes maybe the routes that they do take, which also impacts countries like Canada and probably out of South America.
Yeah, it'll change it. And then, those changes they take time. I think a lot of the stuff that people are really worried about, and before we came on air, we kind of discussed a few of these, but they're issues, and they're issues that we need to pay attention to, but it's not like the calendar is going to hit January 20th and the market's going to know all these answers. It's probably going to be 2026, 27 before we have the answer to some of these questions that are hanging out ahead of us. Yeah,
one of the things I've heard a lot from farmers over the course of, I would say December, and I heard it yesterday again, people, we get to the Q&A part of the keynote or afterwards, people come up and say, canola, for example. I don't know if I should be growing a lot of it because what if they get rid of seed oils in the U.S.? That's really going to impact. Maybe I shouldn't grow it.
Yeah,
a little too soon.
I would say yes. Number one, certain individuals have got to get installed into offices before that's an issue. Number two, even if there is a war on seed oils in the food sector in the U.S., it's not like it's going to be a snap of the finger and there's no more canola oil or soybean oil being used in any of our food products. That's a lengthy time period. Now, I will say, some of that talk is probably negative to public perception, and it probably is somewhat affecting a small sector of demand right now. But, bear in mind, a large portion of our demand or demand increase over the last couple of years in the veg oil side of things has been from the energy markets and using the canola and the soybean oil in our renewable diesel plants that are popping up all over the place.
Okay, so is that under threat, do you think? Or could changes there that negatively impact that as a market for veg oils?
I don't think they're going to shut it down. I don't think it's going to go backwards. I think growth will probably slow. No growth is going to slow in that sector. Mainly right now just because of the indecisiveness. We've been waiting for 2 years for guidance from the Treasury Department, and yep. I don't want to get on too much of a soapbox, but why the Treasury Department's got to give us guidance for biofuels is, I understand the issue. It just seems kind of a messed up system in the world we live in today. Like there should be a better way for these plants to kind of know what the rules of the game are going to be long before January 20th, 2025. We should have known those rules and those thoughts. So I don't get into all that. It's far above my pay grade. But I don't think, it's not going to go backwards. I don't think that's a threat. I just think that growth that maybe a lot of people were planning on as short as 20 months ago has definitely backed off considerably here in the last few months.
So what's the outlook for them for the go forward on veg oils if we're cutting back on some growth when it comes to things like biofuels, renewable diesel, and we've got a huge South America crop? How does all this pan out and impact some of the prices that we see at the farm gate, whether it's Canada or the U.S.?
Well, that's the concern. That's the concern on soybeans. A major financial institution came out I believe yesterday saying they expect to see soybeans down in the $9 range. That picked up some traction and some people pretty nervous about it. That wouldn't be good for canola prices either if soybeans are trading down around $9. Now, that's one institution's thought process. It's something I'm concerned about, and we've got our growers, we're talking to them about ways to start laying into hedges on new crop beans. You're right. I'm going to kind of back up just a second and just kind of bring up that's another genie that's been out of the bottle for a long time. The first trade war did spark investment in South America and Brazil. And we talk about the length of time it takes for these types of changes to occur in the marketplace. There's a prime example. We entered into a trade war with China, what was that, 2017, 2018, when that kind of took full effect. So we're 5 years down the road from that, and now we're starting to see that investment that went away from the U.S. as far as purchasing U.S. soybeans and went into Brazil, right? and the Chinese invested heavily in infrastructure, and Brazil has responded by increasing acres. And that's not going to go backwards either. We're not going to see a drop in acres in South America. We're going to continue to see increases in acres planted. And I mean, all of those are headwinds, and that's why we need a unified, strong, political presence here in the U.S. Hey, we're going to use this crop that we produce, to create fuel, to power our vehicles. And the other thing I think we really need some spine is on the foreign used cooking oil coming in and taking up a lot of that market share.
Yeah, we've talked about that lots on the program here. And what is the definition of domestic feedstocks? Some arguing for continental feedstocks. Again, back to canola being used as a biofuel, right? That's one of those in the weeds policy things that we've been following very, very closely here at RealAg Radio, and still yet to be worked out.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably going to take some time, and like I said, we just need some people with some backbone in there that say this is, it's clearly not doing what it was intended to do. Yeah. And so we've got to step in there and get some of those things fixed.
Yeah, everyone's going to hear a lot about two things. One, used cooking oil out of China, and beef tallow coming out of Brazil. Those are the two things we're going to hear. We're going to hear a lot about here in 25 for sure. Hey, Tyler, thanks a lot for joining us here today on RealAg Radio. Really appreciate it.
You bet. Take care, Shaun.
Hey, the whole team at agmarket.net, Tyler and the rest of the team, Jim, do a great, fantastic job. If you are looking for some insight and some assistance when it comes to marketing, make sure you go to agmarket.net. Okay, when we come back on RealAg Radio, we're going to talk in a product spotlight to Genesis Fertilizers right after this.
Calling all Montana, Dakotas, and northern Minnesota growers. Are you looking for a profitable addition to your farm that can deliver value beyond yield? The new seed omega-3 canola production system can help you unlock a guaranteed path to market with attractive premium opportunities and an active God clause. Contracts include first-in-class agronomy support and free on-farm pickup after harvest. Contracts are available now. Commit early to maximize your opportunity. To learn more, visit omega3canola.com.
Before you get back in the field this year, spend some time with the Corn School on RealAgriculture.com. Get all the information you need on hybrid selection, planting depth, crop inputs, and more from a wide range of industry experts. A massive library of video content is available on demand when you need it most. Spend your time outside of the field, inside the classroom, with the Corn School on RealAgriculture.com.
Get all the information you need to keep your pulse crop healthy and profitable with the Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School is a free YouTube video series covering agronomy, research, and more across a host of different pulse crops. It's also available as an audio podcast wherever you download or stream your favorite podcast. Check us out on YouTube or visit RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School, brought to you by BSF Canada. Time to get caught up with what's going on over there at Genesis Fertilizers. Joining us right now is Terry Drabiuk. Terry, how's it going?
Great, Shaun. Great.
Awesome. Well, we've been reading the Genesis Fertilizers promos here on RealAg Radio for quite some time. I know that a lot of farmers are really excited about this project. Of course, you are as well. So talk about what's going on here in terms of the proposed low carbon fertilizer facility, and how does the upcoming We Can Build It event during the crop production show, it's a week away. Talk about that event and how all this connects together.
Sure. So the We Can Build It event is taking place in Saskatoon at the Hilton Garden Inn during the crop production show on the 15th of January. And it starts at 5, and there's drinks and meals, and we have quite a few players that are going to be in the city. So we've got our EPC, our engineering, procurement, construction firm, DL, E&C, PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC will be in attendance. And Shaun, when we talk about appointing PwC as our financial advisor, or even DL as our EPC, it's really them selecting us. So it took 6 months to have both of them, PwC and DL, basically look at our project. They both those companies are very well known globally. They have reputational risk, and they selected our project because they feel that it's a good project to get their company's name behind. And I think that's why the We Build It name is suitable for that event.
Yeah, for the farmers that we talked to here on the show, there's a lot of concern right now about the stickiness of fertilizer prices and some of the volatility that's out there in the market. And this is a pathway, an opportunity to have a farmer-owned solution, or at least a part of the game, so to speak. So, what are some of the things that farmers can expect to get out of this We Can Build It event?
They're going to hear from these companies I just mentioned about. Those companies are going to talk about how the plant is going to be built. We're currently in the throes of doing our front-end engineering and design. That acronym is FEED. So we're in the throes of that. So we'll have DL, our own engineers, all sitting at the table talking about how this plant's going to be built. And it's important, Shaun, for listeners to understand that we're building one plant, and we're building one plant for farmers. And what those two attributes bring is a security of their fertilizer. So whatever happens around the world or even back home, they'll have a secure fertilizer for their farm, and the profit stays here in Canada.
Yeah, and farmers having skin in the game. Farmers play a big role here in shaping the future of fertilizer production in Western Canada with this build taking place.
Yeah, absolutely, and they're critical. Farmers are critical to this project. We call it a closed loop system, and what that means is that the people who own the plant are also the people who will take product from the plant, and that's so critical in many ways, in terms of bankability, in terms of security of their supply. It's a really good model.
Now, you've a bunch of milestones recently that have been pretty exciting. You've got the PDP and license agreements, as we've been chatting about. Are there going to be some other key announcements made at the event at Crop Production Show? And I guess give us a little bit of the why should farmers attend an event like this, whether they're invested or not invested yet?
Yeah, I think it's really important for all farmers to attend that can. It shows lots of support for both our financial advisor and DLEC, who are coming all the way from Korea. We're also backing that up with meetings with ministers that week and meetings with the crowns. Because we're in the feed, we have to sit down with the utilities like SaskPower, SaskWater, Transgas, Sask Energy, and in Department of Highways, because those are critically important to building this plant. So that anybody who attends is going to get firsthand knowledge on the timeline, how this plant's going to be built. Is there going to be more announcements? Possibly. Shaun, there's a lot of touch points that are going on in the background. We've got a relatively thin team, and whether it be technology providers or banks or strategic investors, or even a phosphate import, urea export play could be involved. So yes, there could be announcements at the event.
Hey, if somebody wants more information on attending an event, I'm going to be there in person. I'm moderating a panel. Looking forward to that. So I'm going to be there. I'm sure there are other members here of the Real Agriculture community that are interested in attending to the show, the Crop Production Show, and the We Can Build It event. So how do they find out about it? How do they attend?
Well, I'm sure there's going to be lots of communications coming out on our behalf. But it's the simplest way, Shaun, is just to go to our website. It's genesisfertilizers.com. There will be a link to the event where you can register, and I encourage people to register early, so we have numbers for food and drinks and that type of stuff. And on there is all our profiles, so you could go into who we are, and you can directly contact me via email or phone, or anybody that actually sits on the board of directors. And I do look forward to seeing you again at the show, and I look forward to a great event.
We've been talking to Terry Drabiuk. He is with Genesis Fertilizers. Terry, thanks a lot for joining us here today on RealAg Radio for this product spotlight. Really appreciate it.
Okay, thanks, Shaun.
We'll hope to see all of you at the crop production show and the We Can Build It event with Genesis Fertilizer. And make sure you go to genesisfertilizers.com, as Terry mentioned, for more information. We'll be right back on RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM, right after this.
Ready to take your oat game to the next level? Try CDC Endure from Alliance Seed. CDC Endure oats are consistently one of the top-yielding varieties in the Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta provincial yield trials. With strong standability, excellent disease resistance, and excellent end-use quality, CDC Endure might be the variety for you and your farm. Available from authorized Alliance Seed retailers. For more information, visit allianceseed.com.
Lima Grain Cereal Seed brings you best-in-class performance for winter and spring wheat, including 12 national wheat yield contest winners in 2024. With the most extensive coaxium portfolio and over 15 top-performing varieties, Lima Grain delivers superior genetics to control grassy weeds when you need it, fall or spring. Boost your yield potential today. Visit limagraincerealseeds.com or call your LCS Regional Commercial Manager for more info. And we'll go back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Hey, trust Alliance Seed to provide the expertise and information needed to match right seed to your farm's unique potential. Every seed starts with a story at Alliance Seed. Start your success story by visiting allianceseed.com. Well, it's been a bit of a hairy week in Ottawa, so to speak, and joining us to maybe chat about that a little bit, and a meeting that happened last week in the U.S. as we continue to focus on this Canada-U.S. trading relationship from an agriculture perspective. We're talking to the Shadow Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food for the Conservative Party of Canada, based out of the riding of Foothills here in Alberta. It is John Barlow. John, how are we doing?
I'm great, Shaun. Thanks very much for having me.
Yeah. How was your holiday season?
It's been good. It's been obviously a little more hectic than one would expect for this time of year, and but no, it's been great to be home. Always appreciate some time back in the riding, and it was plus 10 at midnight last night, so it's been pretty nice weather too.
Yeah, we're getting a Chinook. I've got a friend from Guelph that's in town today, and he texted me. He's like, "What is this?" I'm like, "This is a Chinook. Get ready.
This is normal.
Hold on to your hat, because this is why it's a little bit warmer." But the wind is definitely pumping pretty good here today in southern Alberta. Okay, we're going to get to what's going on in Ottawa, but first I want to hit on your time last week. You were down in Iowa at the SARL meeting. Now that's the State Ag and Rural Leaders meeting. Okay, so what is that and who attends?
Well, it's a collection of mainly state level legislators and senators from across the United States, some provincial representatives from Canada, getting together to talk about the main agriculture issues that are top of mind. And obviously, for me, I felt this was a great opportunity to just reinforce with our American counterparts the importance of our relationship, specifically in agriculture. And certainly when we have President-elect Donald Trump threatening tariffs on products right across a variety of industries, I think any opportunity we have to just talk about the importance of that relationship was an opportunity I couldn't miss.
And what kind of response did you get?
I think it's always encouraging to hear from state and national representatives that they do understand the importance of our relationship. But sometimes it's a little bit surprising that they don't understand just how significant that relationship is. The scope of the value of the products and just how integrated, especially our agriculture industry is when, for example, for us in southern Alberta, the number of times cattle is moving across our borders, whether they're being fed in Canada and slaughtered in the United States or vice versa, hogs, much the same. So there's a lot of urban legislators as well that don't understand that quite to the level that we think they should. So it's really a good opportunity to just stress that relationship once again, especially with the situation we're facing right now.
Is there a common point? Like, you work in the room, you're walking around, hey, I'm John Barlow, and introduce yourself. Is there a piece of like a story or a fact that you were commonly presenting to people?
Yeah, I think the one that really caught most off guard, because the narrative south of the border is that there's a substantial trade deficit in Canada's favor, but on the agri-food, for example, when you tell them that the average Canadian is eating about $800 worth of American products every single day in agri-food products, and it's about $150 Americans are eating of Canadian agri-food products every day. It shows you it's a pretty substantial difference, and that really surprises them when they hear that number.
Yeah, John, when I was in Pasco yesterday, and there's a good example. There's a packing plant in Pasco. Probably does not exist if there wasn't Canadian live cattle going across the border. That plant is viable, from what people have told me, because of the supply of Canadian cattle. If those cattle weren't going into that region, that plant doesn't exist, and that also hurts local producers there. I had a farmer come up to me and say, you know what, I get all what you've said about the value of the relationship and the history of it. There's a deficit. You're going to have to buy more.
Yeah.
Is it that simple?
It is that simple. It's I don't think they understand that, for Canada, we are the number one export market on agricultural products for about 25 or 26 states. So that's significant. So you need to pinpoint that to each one of these legislators to understand who their number one partner is. And if they, put these tariffs on Canadian products, we're going to have to look for different markets, and we're going to be going at markets where they are currently exporting their products to, and hopefully eating away at their international markets as well.
Do you think that all of the conversation about the 51st state is a distraction from dealing with this issue? Like, because I'm getting that question a lot. I had, I don't know how many texts yesterday. Like, is this going to happen? Is this going to happen? And this is from friends in the U.S. Okay, and these are serious people. These are not, these are people I've known for a long time and have serious jobs. And asking, it just feels like it's a real distraction from now dealing with some of these details.
Yeah, honestly, I don't think too many people are taking it all that seriously. It didn't really come up at all during the meetings in Iowa, which is encouraging to hear that they weren't taking this too seriously. But I think it is just a distraction. I don't think there's really any likelihood of this actually happening.
Yeah, I pulled up a slide here for those of you watching on YouTube, and I show this to audiences all the time, John. This is the growth of Canada-U.S. agricultural trade since 1990. And you look at it just has continued to grow, and Canadian reference here, but it's a bit of a hockey stick since 2020, and not just in one direction. There's been substantial growth of exports from Canada into the U.S. and vice versa. U.S. products coming north into Canada. I think this graph shows this. As both countries have tried to diversify their trading relationship, we've actually increased our reliance on each other.
Yeah, and I think that graph is really important. That it shows, again, how interconnected we are, but just how fair the trade has been. And I think that's an important element to the agreement that we have with the United States, whether that was NAFTA or now CUSMA, USMCA. That there really isn't a trade deficit. If it's gone one way or another over the decades, and certainly even now they're both increasing at a fairly common rate, and we rely on one another. And I think that's just a reason I wanted to be there in Iowa, again, just to reinforce that and ensure that our American colleagues who were at that event also understood just exactly how tight this relationship is.
Did you get a chance to meet the nominee to be USDA Secretary, Brooke Rollins?
No, I was really hoping she would be there, but unfortunately she was not in attendance. That was kind of top of my list, and hoping that I would have that opportunity, but unfortunately she was not in attendance.
Okay. Any other things from the meeting you want to hit on?
No, I think a couple of the things that really stood out was discussions on emerging diseases, how we're addressing, foot and mouth, African swine fever, obviously avian flu, really common concerns in Canada and the United States. And we had an opportunity to tour the veterinary college at Iowa State University, which is among the top schools in North America, and really have an in-depth discussion on what some of their protocols and strategies are in dealing with these emerging diseases, and just how critical it is that we are working on these issues together. Certainly they are going to impact both of our countries, and the potential consequences of those diseases is quite consequential.
Yeah, I was on campus at Iowa State 2 years ago, and I did that same tour, went through some of the meat inspection classrooms where they bring the carcass in, and very, very cool stuff. Planning to be back on campus there in the fall when Arizona State Sun Devils go to play the Cyclones. So I got a road trip planned again to go back.
Oh, that's awesome.
Okay. What are you doing with all your time now? We got Parliament shut down. What now? What does one do? What's happening?
I guess I'm going to have to learn to play bridge or something. I'll have to find a new hobby. No, but all the seriousness, although we don't go back to Parliament, still have a number of meetings with agriculture stakeholders across the country that I've made those commitments to, and I'm still going to do those, and still work with our farm families across the country and discuss the issues most important to them, and obviously prepare for an election, which could be sooner rather than later.
Does the committee work just all stop too?
Everything stops. It just comes to a grinding halt. So any of the work that we've been doing at committee also gets shelved, unfortunately, which, we those things are important as well. So not only does legislation and everything die on the order paper, but a lot of the work that we have been doing gets postponed as well.
You had a private members bill. That's torched right now, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, private members' bills don't die necessarily. They come back, but they have to go back to the beginning of the previous stage. Mine's currently in the Senate. But, for all intents and purposes, this just delays it even further, which makes passing that private members' bill in this Parliament very, very unlikely.
So like 234 in the abyss, 282 kind of in the abyss, those are all just kind of floating in the ether then?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay. Just a technical question, because I've had a lot of the audience asking me this, and you would know. Your colleague in Parliament, the Minister of Agriculture, Lawrence MacAulay, does he still do official duties? Like, can they go on a trade mission, stuff like that, or is that all shut down too?
Yeah, no, the government itself, so Cabinet, the Prime Minister, still operate. They should still be functioning. I think our challenge right now with this, Shaun, is you are likely going to have key members of the government, the Minister of Finance, Intergovernmental Affairs, Public Safety, Foreign Affairs, Industry, all resigning their seats in the next few days to run for the Liberal leadership. So you are going to basically be having a headless government at a time of crisis in Canada, when we are dealing with the potential of tariffs in the United States, issues with China and Russia, crumbling Canadian dollar, not to mention, an affordability crisis here at home. So this is really couldn't be a worse scenario for Canada to have really a rudderless government at a time like this.
Yeah, hindsight, and maybe we should have saw it, but Mexico really did this, right? Mexico had the election prior to the U.S. election. Like, we're kind of ended up at a spot now where we should have seen this. Now, we should have seen this coming, where like having an election now and also maybe a leadership race at this time, it's pretty ugly, and timing is everything, and this is very ill timed. Well, hey, John, I know you got to catch a flight. You got to get out to Ottawa to talk to a couple groups of farmers, so I'll let you get to it. Thanks so much for joining us here today on the show.
Really a pleasure as always, Shaun. Thanks very much, and Happy New Year to you, and hope you had a good holiday as well, and I'm looking forward to a great 2025. Yeah,
it's going to be, there's some concern out in farm country, but I think, it could shape up to be, never say never. It could shape up to be a good year. Hey, when we come back on RealAg Radio, we're going to talk to Krista Thomas from Canada Grains Council. What's the impact on this biotech corn decision made in the USMCA dispute resolution panel? You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM.
What's next doesn't happen by accident, doesn't happen by chance.
What's next happens when experience meets expertise, when data meets dollars, and when steel meets earth.
What's next happens when the promising work of Pioneer's state-of-the-art research centers meets the unsparing challenges of more than 17,000 on-farm trials.
Our ultimate goal is to bring the next seed breakthrough to your field.
Because Pioneer isn't just our name.
It's our mission. Pioneer.
What's next
happens here.
Hi, I'm Bernard Tobin, host of the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com. Throughout the year, on the Soybean School, we'll bring you timely agronomic video content from planting to harvest, from the latest agronomic research to the latest in production technology. Check out our massive video library on YouTube, RealAgriculture.com, or download the audio podcast versions wherever you get your podcasts. The Soybean School is brought to you by BASF and Syngenta Canada.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Hey, big decision. The USMCA CUSMA dispute resolution panel decided in the U.S.'s favor relative to their dispute with Mexico over biotech corn. What does this impact? What kind of impact does this have on Canada? We'll discuss that with our next guest. It is Krista Thomas. She is the VP of Seed Innovation and Trade Policy with Canada Grains Council. Krista, great to have you back on the show. Okay, so how does this decision by the dispute resolution panel, how does it impact Canadian farmers?
That's a really good question because Canada doesn't actually export corn to Mexico. So a lot of people wonder, why is this important for Canada? So I think it's important to remember that, all of our Canadian grain farmers, our grain companies, all of the employees at those companies, their livelihoods really depend on Canada's ability to export grain. And we need to have predictability in our international markets for that to happen. We need to know that, the countries that are accepting our grain today are going to keep accepting it tomorrow and next year and the year after. So sometimes markets do close. And when that happens, because an importing country like Mexico in this case cites, a health or an environmental safety concern, the thing is there's rules that are set out by the WTO and in trade agreements that dictate how that has to happen. So in this case, the panel decision, the panel really agreed with the U.S. that Mexico just didn't follow the rules in this case. So it's sending a signal for that's important for Canadian farmers and exports for the future that we need to have science-based decisions and follow the rules for international trade.
Yeah, so Mexico is an important market for Canadian canola, which also is, GM for example. This was, I guess, a trade barrier that was put up by the former president of Mexico, AMLO. It's been continued by President Sheinbaum. Do we expect Mexico to comply with the ruling, or what's been the messaging out of Mexico?
Well, what Mexico has said in the media is that they don't necessarily agree with the decision, but they'll respect it. And we've heard some discussion from the current president, Claudia Sheinbaum, about trying to proceed with a ban on growing GM corn as a crop in Mexico. But we haven't heard too much yet about what the impact or what the intention would be around trade. So we're hoping that, Canada, US, and Mexico can keep the discussion going and, bring the discussion to focus on the sustainability benefits of GM crops and how we keep markets open for So we're providing affordable and nutritious food reliably to everyone in North America.
Yeah, and I remember when the dispute panel was originally formed, Canada was speaking up for, on the U.S. side and supporting the U.S. the U.S. Decision to go this route.
Canada, so we didn't have maybe the same direct impacts as the U.S. So Canada joined the dispute as a third party. So that allowed our officials to participate in the discussions, and we submitted a really long 100+ page written submission to the panel. Canada's comments, really focused on technical matters of law, and Canada was also able to cite some examples where we've used, the international standards that lay out how you assess the safety of GM crops to address kind of similar challenges to what Mexico was identifying in their submissions to the panel.
Are there deadlines for Mexico in this situation? Because I'm just thinking, we had a dispute resolution panel on dairy, a dairy dispute between Canada and the U.S. It's not really resolved. It just feels like it's sort of drug out and both sides claimed victory. In this case, is there a little bit more teeth to it all in terms of a compliance, or does it have the opportunity to just kind of drag out the similar sort of way?
It's awfully hard to predict. There is a certain number of days deadline for, Mexico to take action on the panel decision. But there's a wider political context happening right now with respect to trade in North America. So I don't want to try to predict how this will happen. I do hope, though, that, again, Canada, Mexico, and the U.S. can maybe have some additional dialogue about the sustainability benefits of GM crops and try to reinforce the common ground.
Now, can Mexico, is there enough supply of corn to, in Mexico? Can they afford not to import U.S. corn?
Yeah. So that's part of the complexity of this situation. So starting in 2020 and 2023, Mexico issued some decrees that were banning the use of GM corn in food. So Mexico argued that wouldn't really have much of an impact on exports from the U.S. because it's mainly white, non-GMO corn that's used in food. But the decrees also called for a gradual substitution of GM corn in livestock feed, and that's where the yellow corn is used. And Mexico very much, depends on the U.S. corn for that use. But the purpose of the dispute here was really, that if a country is going to set a policy that impacts trade, they have to do a risk assessment. That risk assessment has to be published. Your trading partners have to have a chance to comment on it. And after you've characterized all the evidence and identified a problem, you have to select the least trade restrictive approach to solving it. So the issue at hand here was kind of one of principle, that Mexico didn't follow those rules in the way that they're obligated to under the USMCA. So that was what the U.S. was challenging them on.
Okay, so to wrap up, what are the next steps for Canada, Mexico, and the U.S. Relative to trade then?
Yeah, I think that, what did come through in the panel discussions is that all three countries want their farmers to have, to support their livelihoods and to help them take care of the land. And we have a long history of cooperation on biotech and in agriculture. So I think that there are opportunities to continue that discussion through ag committees under USMCA and in other forums. So I hope that we can move past this and encourage policies that are going to be good for Canadian farmers.
Yeah, I've been telling audiences in my speeches, the trade issues between Canada and the U.S. are different than the ones between the U.S. and Mexico. Dairy, for the U.S. dairy industry, Mexico, a critical market. Of course, we've got the southern border, U.S. southern border immigration issue that's going to come to a head past or post January 20th after the inauguration, and we also have the screwworm issue in terms of Mexican cattle being able to come into the U.S. as well. So there's a lot happening, and we probably can expect a few crossing of swords when it comes to some of those issues. Indeed, never mind the review and relook at the USMCA, which seems to be kind of a guarantee at this point, as well as, of course, the Trump tariffs. Krista, here's one thing for sure. We've got lots to talk about going forward. So I look forward to the next time we get to chat.
Thanks for having me, Shaun.
Really do appreciate it. Hey, if you have any feedback on today's show, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Thanks for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you for downloading this RealAg Radio podcast, brought to you by AIM EC Herbicide from FMC. Fast-acting AIM EC Herbicide is the go-to tank mix for the hottest spring burn-off of the toughest weeds. Plus, get $4 off per acre with the ACE Resistant Weeds program. Visit ag.fmc.com for more.
Really fun show today for RealAg Radio. Appreciate everybody downloading the RealAg Radio podcast and making it a regular part of your day. Hey, thanks so much, everybody. Great show today, really jam-packed, cover a lot of different issues. It was great having Krista Thomas on the show because I've heard from a lot of the Real Agriculture audience, why do we care on a trade dispute between the U.S. and Mexico? And people sort of be like, why does this apply to us? And I think Krista did a really good job of explaining exactly that, why it is important. The Mexico market, very important for some commodities like canola that are also GM. And so if Mexico can pull this on GM corn coming from the U.S. into Mexico, then they could do the same thing on canola. And so Canada has some interest. They got some skin in the game, as they say. It was also great to catch up with John Barlow and hear about his trip to Iowa for that SARL meeting. There was quite a few Canadians. I've seen a lot of pictures over Instagram, different organizations and groups being at that meeting and connecting with some of their agricultural policy and legislative peers in the U.S. What I've been telling audiences in different speeches, and I was in Kennewick earlier this week, or yesterday. Oh, this week is kind of a blur. If you think back to past times where there's been trade disputes, and even the first Trump administration, Canada really got their strategy was, connect with lawmakers in the U.S., state level, federal level, White House, both sides of Congress, and find friends that will assist and lobby on Canada's behalf in terms of the importance of the trade relationship. And I've been kind of purely speculating because I'm not in those rooms, but I'm an observer, a keen observer, curious observer. What I've been wondering is, behind closed doors, are we going to have great discussions? And we've heard, Danielle Smith, Premier of Alberta, did a trade mission. She talked about how really good discussions. Doug Ford has been doing the same. And hey, how about Doug Ford? Great appearance on Fox I think it was last night on the Jesse Waters show. Jesse Waters has been kind of trolling and talking about Canada as a 51st state, like Jesse Waters can and does on a lot of issues. And Premier Ford did a great job. He talked about hey, we can lean in on each other and have, these two countries working together, and 1 + 1 = 3. I'm paraphrasing. He put it a little bit differently. Lost on Waters. But anyway, back. So Canada making all these trips and having, these discussions. I think behind closed doors, they're going to see the same sort of support. But what has changed, in my mind, less some of the thoughts around MAGA and some of the things that President Trump talks about, they've gone mainstream. So if you think back to the first administration, he said something and it was like cheese fell off the cracker, like he's flown the coop. Where did he get this from? Way out of left field. That's not the case. There's still some stuff, believe me, that are out there, but they're a little bit more mainstream and more accepted and being taken a little bit more at face value. I also think you shouldn't say I think the track record speaks to this. You shouldn't say, oh, he's kidding. I don't know why we continue to do that and say, oh, he's kidding. He wasn't serious. Oh, he's kidding. Really? Is he kidding? I don't think so. Is he really kidding about this 51st state thing? I don't think so. I think it's going to happen? No. But is he kidding about it? No. It gets back to his transactional mindset. So it's become a little less politically acceptable for a member of U.S. Congress in a state that sees an important trading relationship with Canada to stand up and say, hey, by the way, I don't believe we're treating Canadians very well. I don't think that is not the politics of today. That is not the politics of today. It was. You could do it previously, just, 4, 5, 6 short years ago. Not in today's environment. If you're listening to this show or you've seen some of my keynotes, you've heard me say protectionism is increasing on both sides of the aisle, in the Senate, in the House of Representatives, definitely in the White House. So Canada's going to have to find some different strategies, maybe find some different friends. Some of the old friends may not be they're still friends, but they're just not willing to do the work for us. We may have to do some of this work on our own. And I think it really starts 2 places. One, as has been talked about being addressed, is to do with illegals crossing from Canada to the United States. Although the number is low, I think Canada does need to show some action. I probably am a little bit in the minority, but I don't begrudge at all Premier Smith and some of the things that she has been talking about doing, this 4-kilometer zone and, putting sheriffs, increasing the amount of drone use and dogs. They're going to be bored out of their minds for the most part because there's not a lot of action. But at the same time, I think it shows movement and that Canada's taking some of that criticism seriously, because the criticism in some cases is probably a little bit warranted. Where the action is really going to happen, and I'll give you an example. Is I think action is going to really have to happen when it comes to defense spending. We, as a member of NATO, we've heard, going back to the first Trump administration, this idea of the 2% of GDP going to military spending. And President Trump really pushing on the fact that in the first administration that, hey, a lot of countries not paying their way. U.S. essentially doing everybody's work for them. And I think why some Canadians get so upset about the fact that they're being, this whole 51st state and the subsidization, and they get upset because they know when it comes to the military, it's actually the truth. There is some truth to it. Canada has really had zero commitment or lack of commitment to funding its military because there's been this level of comfort that, hey, our great ally and our friend and our neighbor to the south is just going to protect us. It's in their best interest to protect us. And so therefore, we don't need to be committed to it. And I've talked before on the show about my trip to the Maritimes a couple times, and you talk to some of the military families and just the brutal stories in terms of how we are very underfunded from even an equipment standpoint. And what we're doing, it's really, really disheartening, very disheartening. So I think this is an area where it is on us. Some congressmen from Iowa or from Maine or California or Montana or North Dakota, they can't do it for us. We as Canadians need to do this. This is on us to make this change. And you got to ask ourselves, why? What is our problem? Why is it taking so long to make a change like this, especially with what is going on in the world? And a part of the reason why I think it's difficult for some Canadians to get their heads around it is because we're coming out of a government for the last 10 years that has really tried to make talking about increasing military spending as if it's anti-Canadian, as if it's being a warmonger, if it's being aggressive. I think the mood has changed. Things have shifted. And this is a change I think that we're going to have to make, as not only basically because it's being requested or being pushed by the most powerful country in the world, but is it in Canada's best interests? Maybe, probably. Got to ask ourselves that for sure. And over the last couple days, as we continue to hear more and more about this 51st state thing, and I got real people, serious people, saying, "Hey, is this going to happen?" I'm like, no. It's, the more you talk about something, the more it becomes like, is this real? And a lot of people are kind of wondering, what exactly is going on here? What is the mood in Canada to this? Anyways, a couple people I sent the tweet from Pierre Poilievre, and I can't remember if John and I talked about this in the interview. I don't think that we did, but I had sent the Poilievre tweet or X post to a number of people that have been asking me about what kind of is the mood in Canada when it comes to some of this talk. And from a couple people, totally unrelated to each other, one of the things that, or what I got back was, pay your military bill. So it started as, the reaction being, oh, it's just Trump being Trump. He's just kidding. He's talking about other people, not Canada. This is, we talked about this a lot on the RealAg Issues panel, that Canada continues to think it's somehow different because it's adjacent or it's a neighbor. That is a false pretense. False pretense. We talked about this yesterday in Washington, where, a lot of times we divided the world, allies and foes. Good, evil. Team 1, team 2. And Canada has always had this feeling, and for some reason, for some period, I think it was real. It was there was good reason to feel this way, that, hey, that's China, that's Iran, that's Russia, that's Europe. Canada's different. In today's in today's environment, this multipolar world, I'm not quite sure that a President Trump views the relationship with Canada any different than he does the relationship with China. Very transactional. I don't know if we're really going to be viewed as different. This gets back to my whole, and on our content team, we all don't agree with this, but this gets back to Canada just relying on this phrase of integrated supply chains. Zero interest in keeping those integrated supply chains in the U.S. in my mind. I think this is a level of uncomfortable for us. So here's Pierre's tweet. I think this is Pierre Poilievre, leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. And he said, Canada will never be the 51st state, period. We are a great and independent country. We are the best friend of the U.S. We spend billions of dollars and hundreds of lives helping Americans retaliate against Al-Qaeda's 9/11 attacks. We supply the U.S. with billions of dollars of high quality and totally reliable energy, well below the market prices. We buy hundreds of billions of dollars of American goods. Our weak and pathetic NDP Liberal government has failed to make these obvious points. I will fight for Canada. When I am Prime Minister, we will rebuild our military and take back control of the border to secure both Canada and the U.S. We will take back control of our Arctic to keep Russia and China out. We will axe taxes, slash red tape, and rapidly greenlight massive resource projects to bring home paychecks and production to our country. In other words, we will put Canada first. So, great statement. Great statement. In my opinion, I think it was very well put. This is a change in approach. I don't think we're going to see a lot of... This is a little bit more what Mexico's been doing, pushing back. Now, it's easy to push back. To get things done is a little bit harder. I'm interested in what this relationship looks like between Pierre Poilievre as prime minister and Donald Trump as president. A lot of you believe that they are going to see eye to eye, strength versus strength, and conservative to conservative. They're going to find kinship. I got to be convinced. Now, listen, I hope they see eye to eye. It's for Canada's benefit that they do. I'm just not so confident it's going to be as rosy as some of you think it's going to be. Now, Elon Musk, who's very close to President Trump, has been, he had some very positive comments about Pierre Poilievre's performance in that Jordan Peterson interview from last week. That's encouraging. He's in the ear of President Trump. From the questions yesterday in the press conference where Trump was talking about, using military force to invade Greenland and economically forcing Canada to join the United States, he was asked about Poilievre and he really didn't care. I'm not even sure he knew who he was. It didn't really feel that way. We will see because the past has shown us this. We will see President Trump apply a nickname to Pierre Poilievre. I have speculation and thoughts on what that nickname could and will be. I'll save those to myself for now. Maybe we'll talk about it on Friday's issues panel. He's going to give him a nickname. He's going to make fun of him. He's going to find some weaknesses. And he's going to twist. Because that's what he does to everybody. And it's going to be really upon whenever we have an election, which can't happen soon enough based on how rudderless we are. We need the election to be like now because we need leadership now. This is a fork in the road for Canada in many regards, just not economically. I'm working on a piece about how the timing could not be better for Pierre Poilievre to give Canadiana a shot in the arm. I'm going to write that piece, and we're going to talk about it here on the show. But trying times really right now for Canada. And as I shared that tweet that I just read you, so I shared that tweet with people, the reaction was from a couple, laughed and pay your military bill. Don't really care. So we'll see what the outcome is here. So those are just a bunch of thoughts from the last couple days. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed the extended version of this show because we don't always have a lot of time to get to all of it on in the hour that we put on Rural Radio 147. If you do have feedback or thoughts on any of this or anything you heard that I just said or from the show today, would love to have you send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Cheers, everybody.